Western Australia contains one of the largest stretches of sparsely inhabited land on the continent. Beyond the coastal cities, the terrain flattens and dries. Vegetation thins. Roads become infrequent and then disappear altogether. Distances are measured less by miles than by hours of uninterrupted driving, often without signage or visible landmarks. The interior is shaped by heat and restraint. Rain arrives irregularly, sometimes months apart, and when it does, it rarely lingers. The soil is shallow and hard. Trees grow slowly and far from one another. Shade exists, but it must be sought deliberately. During the day, temperatures regularly rise above 40 degrees Celsius. At night, the air cools quickly, exposing the body to sharp contrast rather than relief. Human presence in this region is limited and functional. Small mining operations, isolated cattle stations, and infrequent service tracks mark the few points of activity. Between them lies silence. Communication infrastructure is minimal. Movement through the area depends on preparation, fuel, and direction. It is an environment that does not pursue danger, but does not soften its conditions either. Survival here is not dramatic. It is methodical, conditional, and indifferent to intention. Ricky McGee was a British-born Australian living on the margins of stability in the early 2000s. By 2006, his life was unsettled. He moved frequently, relied on temporary arrangements, and traveled without long-term planning. Like many who crossed Australia's interior without formal purpose, his movement was informal rather than organized. He was not an explorer, a surveyor, or a professional outdoorsman. McGee did not carry specialized survival equipment. He had no satellite phone, no emergency beacon, and no mapped route prepared for extended travel. His experience with the outdoors was ordinary, shaped by familiarity rather than training. He understood heat, knew how to conserve effort, and recognized the importance of water, but he lacked the tools and structure that deliberate desert travel requires. In January 2006, McGee was traveling through Western Australia with an acquaintance. The journey was not recreational. It was practical, loosely planned, and dependent on cooperation between people rather than systems. Roads in the region often appear navigable while offering little margin for error. A single vehicle failure or separation can extend consequences beyond immediate reach. At the time, McGee carried minimal supplies. Accounts indicate he had limited food and no significant water reserves. His clothing was ordinary and unsuitable for prolonged exposure. There was no expectation that the journey would extend beyond routine travel. Nothing in his background suggested preparation for isolation lasting weeks. There was no evidence of anticipation or foresight. What followed was not shaped by confidence or intent, but by circumstance and the absence of alternatives. The separation occurred without warning and without ceremony. While traveling through a remote section of Western Australia, McGee and his companion stopped the vehicle. The reasons remain partially unclear in public records, though later accounts suggest a dispute or disagreement. What is documented is the outcome. McGee was left behind. The vehicle departed. He was alone. There was no immediate sense of distance. In open terrain, separation can appear temporary. Sound carries. Tracks remain visible. The horizon feels reachable. McGee initially assumed the departure was brief or reversible. He did not pursue the vehicle immediately. There was no urgent chase, no visible panic. The environment remained unchanged, and so did his understanding of the situation. As time passed, the absence became fixed. The vehicle did not return. The road offered no traffic. There were no nearby structures, fences, or marked paths. Communication was not possible. What had begun as a pause became a condition. McGee's available options narrowed quickly. Walking without water risked collapse. Remaining in place offered no guarantee of discovery. The interior provided no cues for direction, only distance. Movement meant exposure. Stillness meant waiting. This was the moment the situation crossed from inconvenience into isolation. There was no dramatic signal, only the quiet recognition that assistance would not arrive on its own. From that point forward, every decision carried weight. The environment had not changed. The terms of survival had. Once the possibility of quick recovery faded, McGee shifted from expectation to maintenance. Movement became deliberate. Energy was conserved. The priority narrowed to water, then shelter, then food. Without equipment, each requirement depended on observation rather than force. He chose not to travel far. In open desert, walking increases dehydration faster than it improves chances of discovery. McGee remained near the area where he had been left, using what little structure the landscape offered. Low shrubs and sparse trees provided limited shade. During the hottest hours, he stayed still. Activity was pushed to early morning and evening, when the temperature dropped enough to reduce water loss. Water became the central constraint. With no containers, he relied on rainfall. Using plastic sheeting and scraps found in the area, he fashioned a simple rain catchment, directing runoff into makeshift basins. Rain was infrequent, but even small amounts were preserved carefully. Each collection was stretched across days. He did not drink to satisfaction, only to function. Food was secondary but necessary. McGee consumed insects, including grasshoppers and ants, which were available in limited numbers and required little energy to obtain. He also ate native plants when he could identify them with reasonable certainty. There was no abundance. Intake remained minimal, intended to slow weight loss rather than restore strength. Shelter was basic. He constructed a low windbreak from branches and debris, offering modest protection from sun and nighttime exposure. It did not block heat. It did not block cold. It reduced neither fully, but it marked a fixed point. Returning to the same location provided continuity and reduced decision fatigue. Days developed a pattern. Wake early. Assess the sky. Check for moisture. Remain still through the heat. Collect insects when possible. Monitor the body for signs of decline. McGee avoided unnecessary risk. There were no attempts to hunt or travel long distances. Survival depended on restraint rather than effort. In this environment, time did not move evenly. Without a clock or calendar, days were measured by light and temperature. The absence of change became its own challenge. McGee did not mark days. He did not count weeks. His focus remained narrow, fixed on the immediate requirements of remaining alive. This phase was not defined by action, but by repetition. The landscape did not provide assistance, but it allowed persistence. As long as rain fell occasionally, and as long as he remained conscious and mobile, survival remained possible. Not assured. Only possible. As days passed, the absence of external reference points altered McGee's sense of duration. Without dates or schedules, time compressed and expanded unpredictably. Individual days lost distinction. What mattered was not how long he had been there, but whether the conditions of the day allowed continuation. His body adapted unevenly. Weight loss was gradual at first, then more visible. Muscle mass reduced. Movement slowed. Hunger became constant but muted, settling into the background rather than demanding attention. Thirst remained sharper. When rain did not come, he rationed what little water he had with increasing care. Mouth and throat stayed dry for long periods. Speech, when attempted, became difficult. Physical effort was minimized. McGee learned which actions produced return and which only consumed energy. Insects were gathered when available, but never chased. Plants were eaten sparingly, and only those he believed safe. Mistakes in identification could not be corrected. Caution replaced curiosity. Weather patterns shaped behavior. Cloud cover altered temperature slightly. Wind increased dehydration. Rain, when it came, reset priorities entirely. Collection took precedence over rest. Even small showers were used fully, with runoff guided into improvised containers. Loss through evaporation or spillage was avoided. Water was never assumed to be replaceable. In the absence of conversation or movement, the mind turned inward. Records indicate no attempts to signal aircraft or distant traffic. There were few opportunities, and the effort required was high. Instead, McGee remained where discovery was at least theoretically possible. This decision limited risk but extended exposure. Infection and minor injuries became concerns. Scratches healed slowly. Insect bites accumulated. Hygiene was minimal. The skin adapted, but inflammation increased. The body remained functional, but only just. What sustained McGee through this period was not optimism or planning, but consistency. Each day followed the same restrained pattern. He did not set goals beyond the immediate. There was no imagined endpoint. Survival existed only in the present tense. As time continued without markers, endurance became less about strength and more about refusal. The refusal to waste energy. The refusal to panic. The refusal to abandon a routine that, while insufficient, had not yet failed. By the later weeks, the cumulative effects of deprivation became visible. McGee's weight loss was severe. His clothing hung loose, offering little insulation or protection. Prolonged exposure to sun and wind affected his skin, causing cracking and inflammation that did not fully heal. Movement required more effort. Recovery took longer. The immune system weakened. Minor infections lingered. Insect bites swelled and became painful. With no means of cleaning wounds properly, irritation accumulated. There is no evidence of serious injury, but the absence of improvement became its own form of decline. The body no longer repaired itself efficiently. Mental strain increased as physical reserves diminished. Fatigue reduced concentration. Simple decisions required longer consideration. Mistakes carried greater consequence. Despite this, McGee did not attempt long-distance travel. Accounts suggest he understood that walking without water would likely end the situation permanently. Weather conditions remained variable. Heat continued to dominate the day. Nights brought cold that disrupted rest. Shelter reduced exposure but did not eliminate it. Sleep was fragmented. The body remained alert, not in fear, but in response to discomfort and imbalance. At this stage, survival depended on the continuation of small advantages. Rainfall, however limited, still occurred. The routine remained intact. There were no major failures, only slow erosion. Each day ended without resolution, and each morning began without assurance. The environment offered no signal of change. There was no indication that rescue efforts were underway. McGee's visibility from a distance was minimal. His presence was quiet and unmarked. What persisted was endurance under diminishing conditions. Not adaptation in the sense of improvement, but adaptation in acceptance. The ability to function at a reduced level, to remain present despite ongoing loss, defined this phase. In late March 2006, movement appeared where none had before. Two men traveling through the region noticed signs inconsistent with the surrounding terrain. What they found was not a camp in the conventional sense, but evidence of prolonged human presence. Nearby, McGee was located in a weakened state. The time between his abandonment and discovery was later established as 71 days. By the time he was found, he had lost a significant amount of body weight. He was dehydrated, sunburned, and physically diminished, but conscious. There was no confusion about his condition. Medical assessment confirmed prolonged exposure and malnutrition. Emergency services were contacted. McGee was transported for treatment, where he remained under observation. Recovery required time, but no permanent organ damage was reported. His survival was documented without embellishment. The methods he described were consistent with the conditions and with the limitations of the environment. The man who left him behind was later charged in connection with the incident. Legal proceedings followed separately from the survival itself. The Outback did not resolve responsibility. It only imposed consequence. There was no public celebration at the site of discovery. The environment remained unchanged. The survival was notable not because of resistance against dramatic threat, but because of the quiet extension of life under minimal conditions.